Assalamualaikum and a very good morning, everyone. So today, I'll talk about how to configure DHCP using Cisco iOS. So in order for you to complete these lab activities, you have to refer to Lab 5 um, that I have uploaded onto the ULearn. So this is the topology for today. If you look carefully, it's pretty much the same with the previous topologies that we have learned in the lab, but I've made a slight modification on this topology. Let me change the pointer options to the pen first. So the changes that I've made here is, instead of having PC1, so I've changed the PCs into to the servers, so that we can set up DHCP servers later on. So essentially, this lab is divided into two parts. The first thing that we're going to do is we are going to set up R3 as a DHCP servers, right? And this PC2 will set it into automatic so that we can acquire IP address from the DHCP servers that has been set up on R3. On the other hand, we also will set up PC0 so that it is in the automatic mode, and we'll try to acquire DHCP services from the DHCP server that we have set on the 192.168.1.142. So basically, we have two parts. We are going to set up the DHCP server here on R3 and also set up IP server on the DHCP server on the server 192.168.1.142. So this is the addressing table that we have for today. So if you look here, PC0, the IP addressing is on the DHCP mode, and the same goes to PC2, which is on the 172.16.1.0 network. Right. So the first part on how we can configure R3 as a DHCP server. So first of all, we have to configure the excluded IPv4 address. Okay, this thing I have explained repeatedly in the lecture session. In order for you to configure routers using a DHCP server, so instead of specifying the IP address that you want to include into the address scope, but in the Cisco iOS, we will specify the IP address that we do not want to include into the DHCP address pool. So in this lab implementation, what we're going to do is we will configure R3 to exclude the first 50 addresses from VLAN 10, which is the VLAN stuff. So if you notice, what are the first usable IP address for VLAN stuff? It is 192.168.1.1. So we counted like the first 50 address, so we give the range from starting .1 until .50. So the IP address that we want to exclude is this range. So the command that you can use to configure the exclusion address is ipdhcp excluded address, and then we give the start range 172.16.1.1 and the end of the range, which is 172.16.1.50. So the second step that we are going to do is we need to create a pool on R3. So basically, you can have many pools on the routers. So if you are going to have multiple DHCP servers that serve different VLANs, say for example, for VLAN staff, you want to have one pool of addresses, and for VLAN student, you want to have another pool of addresses. So you need to set up two pools. All right. So how are we going to know what are the pool of addresses to be assigned to each of the VLAN? So basically, we are using the default router address, right? Default router address. So the interface that for the VLANs, you already have the you are connected to the interface, right? So the interface or the sub interface in our case that is configured with the IP address is assigned to the default router, so that the VLAN or the clients on that facing that particular interface will know, oh, this is the pool of addresses that I will get, right? So in order for you to create a pool, so we use the command ipdcp pool, and then this is the parameter pool r3. So it can be, you notice that this is on the capital letter, so it means that you can always change the name of the pool. It can be pool R3 or pool 1 or whatever that you want the name to be. And the second step is we need to configure DHCP pool to include the network address. So here, so this is the network address, and make sure you have the correct subnet mask, and the default router is the IP address of the sub interface. Okay. So we are going to do the first configuration here. So this is the packet tracer that I have pre-configured earlier on. Now, let me see. We're going to go to R3. So config T. So the first thing that we're going to do is we need to define the pool range, right? So ipdhcp excluded address. So if you want to save time, you just put or press tab and then assign the first range .1.1 and assign the last address in the pool range. So it should be .50, right? Because in the question it already says that we want to exclude the first 50 addresses. So when you do this, you definitely know that the first IP address that should be assigned to the client will start from 172.16.1.51. The next step is we are going to create the pool of address. ipdcp pool, so pool R3, oops. Okay, so I just add, this is for the staff VLAN. And now we are going to assign the network address for the DHCP pool. So 172.16.1.0 and the subnet mask is 255.255.255.128. And do not forget to enter the default routers. All right. So make sure the default router IP address is the IP address of the interface that is facing the clients that requested for the DHCP services. All right. So 172.16.1.1. Okay. So we are done with the configuration. It's pretty much only 3 lines here. So the first lines, so or 4 lines, second lines, third lines, and fourth lines. But you have to remember that this is only the compulsory configuration. We also have the optional configuration, meaning you can also set up the DNS IP address. How you can also set the leasing time, the leasing period, right? Okay, so this is only the essence of how we are going to configure the DHCP services on R3. So let us go to the next step here. So what are the next steps here? We're going to verify the DHCP and the connectivity. So what you're going to do is on PC2, which is the on-client on VLAN stuff, you need to set the IP address as automatic, but you have to remember that the steps here is the steps on the real operating system, on the real Windows. But as we are going to use packet tracer today, so the step might differ. So let's test on PC2. So go to the desktop. So now by default, it is set as static, but because we are going to use DHCP now, so voila, you can see that the DHCP request is successful. So because we already set the pool range from .1, 172.16.1.1 until 172.16.1.50. So the start address of the KCP request from PC2 should be .51. So the rest of the information is the same as given on the DHCP pool configuration. All right. So, guys, we are done with this. So let us continue to the next part, which is we are going to configure DHCP relay on R1. So I already explained what is DHCP relay on R1 during the lecture session. So before we going to configure the DHCP relay, we will first start with configuring the DHCP servers. So you have to understand that packet tracer is only a simulator. So of course, the way you configure DHCP server is way different from the way you configure DHCP servers on the actual Windows operating system, right? So this is a matter of clicking. So you have to go up and look at the tab here. So go to the services tab, and we have so many options here. So click on the DHCP service, right? So you make sure you click on DHCP instead of the DHCP v6. Now on the server pool here, so we will configure the default gateway. So even though the DHCP servers is located on 192.168.1.128 network, but the IP address that we are going to, or the scope of the IP address that we're going to configure is for this particular network, which is 192.168.1.0. So you have to be very careful when you try to configure the DHCP server. All right. So what are the default gateway for 192.168.1.0 network? It should be 192.168.1.1, right? Okay. Guys, I think I've made a mistake here. Oh no, all right. Just checking. Now, the start IP address. So I just follow the exclusion criteria that we have on R3. So we would like to start the IP addressing starting from 192.168.1.51, right? And the subnet mask here, /25, CIDR 25 should be 128. So the max, you can also set the maximum numbers of users here. So for example, here I put 50, right? And we just need to save. Do not forget to click on the service. So we are done in configuring DHCP servers on packet tracer. So the next step that we're going to do is, yes, all right, we're going to test it. So how we're going to test it? Okay, this is the static IP that I have pre-configured before. Now I click on the DHCP. So let's see what happened here. It says that DHCP failed. APIPA is being used. So that leads to my questions. It's a probing question to you guys. So referring to the topology, what would happen if you were to verify the DHCP on PC0? And you have to elaborate your answer.